Welcome back. One of the priorities of the Trump administration's new president's management agenda is, quote, ending overclassification of information. The agency that oversees the policy for that is the Information Security Oversight Office at NARA. Michael Thomas is director of ISOO. John Beglan is director of public sector for Tungsten Automation. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program today. Michael, I start with you. What's the mission of ISOO?
The Information Security Oversight Office is really the referee for how America handles its sensitive information, both unclassified and classified. We help people understand the rules and also enforce them across government.
Do you do that yourself, enforce those rules, or do you just give agencies information about how to do that themselves?
We sort of touch all layers of that. We certainly help write and then explain the regulations. We issue notices that sort of further give agencies information about how to implement the rules, and then we'll assist them with training, and then ultimately we go out and inspect the agencies to make sure they're doing it right. And at the end of every year, we roll up all of that activity into a report that we provide to the president.
What do agencies usually struggle with the most, and what have they really, in your mind, over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, really gotten their arms around in a good way?
Sure. I think agencies these days really understand the need to bring technology to bear on the problems. And the thing that they struggle with is relatively small staffs at every layer of the security apparatus. That is typically what we find, is that those offices feel underfunded, and they feel perhaps that they have maybe not quite the type of staff they need to carry those elements of their work forward in the future.
John, welcome. It's great to have you on the program too. It strikes me that the technology that we've already talked about on this program, some of the tools that are available, are really helpful to those agencies that Michael just described, that feel like they don't have enough people to do all the tasks.
Yes, absolutely. We've understood that quite a while back now, and recognizing that it's a very manually intensive process. This is a time for automation to really come in and be adopted to help this cause. The days of throwing bodies at it are over, okay? We're in the business of really enabling our federal workers to support and sustain their mission plan. And I think this is a perfect area to work with. We've made the investments this year to really support the records management initiative. We've gone so far as now generating some material around that, but also built a symposium, which we're happy to announce at Carousel January 30th, where we will be talking about how we can really affect and implement technology in the right way to support and sustain the operations all across government in all aspects of operation.
Are the tools new, or are they tools that have been around being applied in different ways, or maybe a combination of both?
Well, these are proven as part of our now recent FedRAMP platform called Total Agility. It is an enabler to enable this workforce to do all that is required from the point of ingestion all the way through workflow to data at rest, if you will, the full life cycle as we know it. And this is not, so records are no longer data that's just sitting out there statically. It's dynamic data assets. And we're all about taking the compliance burdens and turning that into strategic assets.
Michael, where does ISOO fit into kind of the broader, I like the word life cycle, of records management and information management across the government?
Right. I mean, when you're talking about information that needs to be sort of protected in the way that it is handled, to be regulated in the way that it is shared, ISOO sort of touches all of that, whether you're talking about national security information, the traditional secret or top secret. I mean, sometimes we're dealing with spy stuff, but sometimes we're just looking out for your social security number. And so we're trying to help agencies implement the programs and continue to refine the programs, bring technology to bear on the programs that then manage that information. And I think this was framed exactly right. Like, these are extraordinary assets that the government expends significant resources to develop and maintain, and everyone within government, across industry, academia, and the private sector, even the American public, should really have the opportunity to reap the full value of that. And so we are in a place where we can do things with information that we've never been able to do before, both while we're using it as a government and also in the way that we can ultimately transfer that value to others over time.
What are some of the things that you're able to do now that you haven't been able to do before, and what's underpinning that? Is it technology? Is it workforce development? Maybe some combination of both, or other things?
Sure. Well, anyone who works in this space will talk to you about the volume of material the government generates, and really the practical reality that we'll never have enough human hands to process it. And the good news is that now in our present moment, we really don't have to rely on the old thinking about how we might deal with the tsunami of records is probably the common metaphor. We're in a place where it's not just the promise of technology, but the practical reality of what can be implemented today that can make a difference. And so we have this, the ability to sort of transcend these long-held structural barriers that keep us from making progress on problems. The president's management agenda cites overclassification, and so has every administration going back to the beginning of that program, right? There's always been a concern about this, and now we're in a unique moment to do something about it. But the other side of that is that there are cultural considerations. Whether you're talking about a culture of thinking about access to paper records versus the digital sharing of records online to truly get material into public's hands, or you're talking about how the government has traditionally managed risk when it comes to national security information in a way that's going to have to evolve to accommodate automation. I think we can't do it the same way just with new tools. We really have to think about how our processes and our culture within agencies and across the government need to change to reap the full benefits of the moment that we're in.
John, you weren't on camera when he was talking about not having enough hands to process it all,
Yes.
but you were nodding very enthusiastically. I imagine that syncs really well with the reason you're so enthusiastic about automation.
So validates everything that we've already addressed with our current install base today. We have many federal customers who have adopted this technology for years now and are enjoying the benefits of scaling out their operations because of this type of technology. So I was nodding in approval with that because we've proven the ROI and we've demonstrated that. We just need to get it in the hands of the rest of our government so that we can make sure that they're running as optimal as possible, right? And just from a legal point of view, legal sufficiency is really the offshoot of this, right? We're always going to make sure that compliance monitoring is part of this. But what's so important too is the human in the loop. It's our belief, and I know it's NARA's and ARMA's as well. But having that human oversight is greatly important to this process too.
How's that role changing in your view, Michael? The human versus the technology, not meaning versus like they're opposed to each other, but in collaboration. Is that relationship changing over time?
Sure. I think that there's a comfort level that needs to evolve where people, I think they're desperate for these tools, but they also need the space to learn to trust them. There's an information transfer, a process transfer that needs to go from what is currently held in human hands and in the human mind of folks that have worked in this era for a long time. And how can that be modeled effectively with automated tools? I mean, I think that's the process we're in, is everybody's figuring that out. And I think this is one of the underlying, maybe the less heralded promises of these tools is irrespective of the vendors that we're talking about. There are many that play in different aspects of this space, lots of pieces of the workflow that not only do we have an opportunity for sort of greater management within agencies or greater throughput to public release, we have the opportunity to draw more information about what's going on in the system. Right now, as the entity that is responsible for gathering all the data about what's going on in the classified information space or the unclassified but controlled information space, I can tell you there are many questions that are impossible for me to answer. But if these tools allow us to move more in the direction of sort of centralization and standardization, agencies doing this in common ways, with the idea of drawing analytics out of these tools built into the discussion, then we can know a lot more about the health of the system. We can provide a lot of answers that are being asked by everyone, from those in civil society who want us to see us release more, that are being asked within the administration, that are right now really impossible to get at.
You used a phrase there that I don't know if it was significant in your mind, but it jumped out at me, and that is agencies doing these things in common ways. How close are you to that vision, and how important is it to get to that vision eventually?
Well, I think it depends on how you approach the issue. I mean, the way that I think of it is, as an entity that is responsible for issuing standards, is that I want to ensure that certain things are done in an interoperable way. The way that we craft guidance as we transition from, let's say, guidance for classified information use, that right now it's typically a PDF that sits in a drawer, but it's really a data set, and a data set that could empower these tools. So perhaps we need to make sure that agencies are capturing standard data in those guides in the way they aren't now. So these are places where we can gently start to move agencies towards doing things in similar ways that'll reap big outcomes, because there'll be enabling factors in these tools that we know we want to implement across government.
John, we spent a lot of time in this conversation and earlier in the program talking about kind of how we got to where we are today and where we are today. What's over the horizon for people that are watching this program, that are immersed in this kind of work on an ongoing basis? What will they maybe be able to do in the future based on evolutions in technology that you're seeing now that maybe they can't do today or can't do as much of today?
Oh, this is what really makes this exciting. I had this conversation down at Indo-Pacific with some of the commanders at TechNet just back in October. And we talked about such things as speed, trust, and security in those three realms. When they're out in the field, they need to have situational awareness rapidly at their fingertips, right? So that's something that we can foresee down the road here is being able to extract the essential data from key data points and make decisions on the fly as needed. In that case, it's for mission critical moments, things that really affect the heat of the moment. But here across the enterprise and federally, there's just so much data extraction still yet to be done, so much analysis that yet needs to be done. And I think that is really where we're going. We're going to be able to see patterns and trends. We're going to be able to make some decisions that currently right now takes way too long to make and possibly might affect our national security in some instances, I dare say. But I really feel we'll be a stronger nation for it. And so this all comes down to real strong data foundations and very clear governance.
Just in the last couple of minutes of this conversation, you've both used the word trust in two different contexts. John, you talked about trust in the data that people in uniform have at the tip of the spear.
Yes.
Michael, you talked about trust in the tools. What builds trust in those areas? In your case, the practitioners that are using those tools, and in your case, the users who are using that data that's delivered to them through these processes. Michael, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think it's a great question insofar as agencies, this is part of historical sort of stovepiping information. Part of that is protecting my information or how I view it and being very cautious about how information moves out of your agency because you want to ensure that the same parameters that you would use to protect it are respected across government. This is not just in the classified information space, this is also in the sort of this controlled unclassified universe. So I think tools like this will help build sort of a quality assurance into that process. From ISOO's perspective, while we deal with all the layers of an agency's security, we always look at it through an information lens. So I'm thinking about how the same tools that we're talking about now will also help us to have much more sort of refined and exquisite apportionment of information only to who it should belong to, not just sending a PDF out in an email that can be forwarded anywhere, right? So those are the kind of things that build trust, that information will truly be safeguarded. At the same time, there is the trust on the public side, where the inability to move information through this system, the inability to get a FOIA request processed or a mandatory declassification request, or to see information declassified on the date that was stamped on the tin, there are good reasons why that stuff doesn't happen. It's not an easy process. You've heard from everyone today that these are underfunded, under-resourced areas of government. But that's not necessarily impactful to the public's understanding. So we have gotten to a place where we have eroded trust in the government at large by the inability of these sort of programs to move information through them properly. So I think it's another major area of trust where the tools that we are talking about are not just about how government can use information effectively itself, but how we can transfer the value of that information to the public. This is something that's very unique to the United States. So we are a nation that is founded on the premise that everything the government creates ultimately belongs to the public, and that there is a time and a place that information, they actually have the expectation that information will be released. And I think we have been ultimately not meeting their expectations about what that should look like. And we're facing the consequences now in part by a degradation in the faith in our institutions.
John, we have less than a minute left, but building that trust, what are the components of that in your view?
Well, I think essentially it comes down to really adopting the ARMA principles. That's important. Accountability, transparency, all of those maturity model disciplines are important. We adopt that in AI. Look, AI is not going to circumvent the framework. It's there to support that. And I think the human in the loop really is the key element here to make sure and ensure explainability and auditability.
John, Michael, it's great to have both of you on the program. Thanks for joining me. You'll get a timeline for how records management's evolved and where it's headed when we come back in a moment. You'll find more innovation in government programs on topics like health IT, cybersecurity, intelligence, and more on demand at fedgovtoday.com. We'll be right back.